Across a series of 4 trades, the New York Mets significantly upgraded their bullpen at this year's trade deadline, and they picked up a center fielder, but they did not add a starter to their rotation. Did the Mets do enough to win a World Series this year? I'll talk about that more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order, only valid through September 30th. Now, going into this trade deadline, David Stearns really laid things out to us on what the Mets were looking for, and he specifically said addressing the bullpen, and he talked about adding both a left-handed arm and a right-handed arm, and made it seem like they were going to go for a setup man for Edwin Diaz and make sure they got at least one more lefty that could complement Brooks Raley in that bullpen. They got 3 relievers. He also said that the Mets are going to pursue an upgrade in center field. They did that. They got Cedric Mullins. He said they were going to be opportunistic in the starting pitching market, but they were not looking for a back of the rotation arm, a depth arm. They were looking for a ceiling raiser. If they could get somebody that could start a playoff game, they might make a move. Well, now you look at what they did, and David Stearns pretty much followed that blueprint to a T. They got the relievers, they got the center fielder, and there was not a starting pitcher that they felt raised their ceiling. And if that's the one complaint you have about the Mets this deadline, look around the league and count the amount of starting pitchers that moved and starting pitchers that would have raised the ceiling for the Mets rotation. I count 2. Merrill Kelly, who went to the Rangers, and Shane Bieber, who went to the Blue Jays. Those are the only 2, both rentals. And if you want to quibble and say that those guys wouldn't have raised the ceiling, you could point out that Shane Bieber has not made an MLB start this season. He's coming off Tommy John. And Merrill Kelly, I think he would have raised the ceiling. But if you want to say that when all of the starters in the Mets rotation are at their best, maybe they have 4 guys better if you really think that Frankie Montas's best is better than Merrill Kelly. I don't, but I'm not going to say, oh, that was the one guy they missed on. And when you look at the other starting pitchers that were on the market, Zach Gallen did not go. Dylan Cease did not go. Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, Joe Ryan, Mackenzie Gore, all the pitchers with control, none of them went. Nobody else got traded, really, that could have helped this rotation other than Kelly and Bieber. Now, are there still looming questions about this roster? Sure, we'll get into them. We'll talk about the rotation in the next segment. We'll talk about who will get option for Cedric Mullins today. So there is things that are still left to discuss. But as I had talked about a little bit on yesterday's show, and I'm talking about the show in the morning, not the Cedric Mullins trade show, although I probably covered it on both. But if you look at what the Mets were able to accomplish at this deadline, they got everything they needed without trading up things they didn't want to. And I think if you were looking at it from a what would the Mets sell perspective going into the deadline, the big questions were, are they going to trade one of their young infielders? Will Acuna, Beatty, Mauricio, or Vientos be on a new team? They all stayed. And then, which of their top prospects would stay? Ultimately, the New York Mets make it through this deadline, and they hold on to Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, Jack Wenninger, and Jonathan Santucci. If I was to rank the top 5 pitching prospects in the Mets system before the deadline, that's probably how I'd line it up. I might have slid Blade Tidwell somewhere in after those top 3, but honestly, I don't even know. I'm not positive I would have. And then you have the position player side of things. Jet Williams, Carson Bench, Jacob Reimer, Ryan Clifford, AJ Ewing. I would have said those are the top 5 position players in this system going into the deadline. If you want to say Gilbert over Ewing, maybe, but honestly, I wouldn't have done that. I honestly might have put Drew Gilbert below Nick Morabito. So when you look at what the Mets were able to accomplish, and what they gave up. They held on to everything. I think David Stearns said it best because he spoke with the media, and he was talking about what they were able to accomplish. And he was asked about windows, this window to contend. You have Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, Edwin Diaz, Kodai Senga. You have all these veterans who are in the prime of their careers, who theoretically are on borrowed time. And this is the one time to win now. That's how the question was phrased. And this was David Stearns' response.
I don't view this as windows. Like our responsibility here is to give ourselves a chance to make the playoffs and ultimately win a World Series every single year. That's what this should be. That's what we're aiming to make it. So I don't view this period of Mets competitiveness in a defined window. I view it as the beginning of what should be a very long and sustained period of competitiveness at the highest level. And I think the moves we were able to make the last couple of days certainly helped that this year without, in a very material way, sacrificing some really high upside special talent that could help us in years to come.
That's exactly what you want to hear as a fan. And I know you want to hear, we want to win now. We will do anything to win a World Series in 2025. But you also don't want to make your chances of winning in 26, 27, and 28 significantly worse because you gave up a potential star player. You traded a future ace where Nolan McLean is going to go on to be a great starting pitcher for the Marlins because you had to get Sandy with his ERA over 6. Like, they did not do anything that's going to hurt them long term. But they also got everything they needed short term. And David Stearns was sort of asked about this deadline. He said the story of this deadline is really an amateur talent acquisition and player development. He said that has been the story of the deadline for the New York Mets. And he said all of those guys deserve the credit because they've been able to identify talent and develop talent to the point that the Mets were able to make all these trades without giving up from the absolute top of their farm system. Blade Tidwell was a high draft pick. Nate Dom was a high draft pick. Drew Gilbert, you spent a lot of money eating down Justin Verlander's contract to get him in that trade. But the trade they just pulled off for Cedric Mullins, I've highlighted this a couple times already. 2 undrafted free agents and a guy you signed for $10,000 as an international free agent. The Mets were able to manufacture assets at this deadline. I think going in, they probably went in with the mindset, if you're talking about the guys that probably hurt the most to move, which was likely the Giants trade, the Tidwell-Gilbert package. I imagine they went into this deadline with that package ready to go, ready to send out, knowing that they were going to be aggressive, that those guys had real value on the market, but they were the position player and the pitcher that were closest to the big leagues among their prospects that they were most comfortable moving. And yes, you move Jose Butto, but Jose Butto, as I've said now for a few days since the trade, I guess the trade took place, 2 days ago now, as you guys are listening to this? As I've been saying since that Tyler Rogers show, Jose Butto was brutal in the playoffs last year, and he did not have any options. So if you look at the Mets bullpen, which we'll get into more in the next segment, they have 7 arms now that are pretty much locked in for the rest of the season. That ace spot would have gone to Jose Butto, and it would have locked you in where Paul Blackburn might have to come off the IL soon. Where would you put him? You wouldn't have a place to put him. You might have to DFA Jose Butto. Or if you don't, you DFA Blackburn. But wait a minute, now you want Nolan McLean to make a start. How are you going to get him on the roster? You need to have one spot in that bullpen that has that optionality to it. And Butto didn't. Is he going to go to the Giants and have a great next couple of years and maybe be stretched out to be a starting pitcher? And could he end up making the Mets look bad if they don't win the World Series this year and Butto becomes a really good starter? Sure. But was he ever going to be a starting pitcher for the New York Mets? Doubtful. So with that said, they get through this deadline. They pick up 3 arms for that bullpen. This bullpen is absolutely disgusting now. You have 2 closers and 5 high leverage guys. If you consider Ryan Stanek a high leverage guy, you have 5. If you don't, you have 4 between Gregory Soto, Brooks Raley, Reed Garrett, and Tyler Rogers. And then again, 2 closers with Diaz and Helsley. That is the type of bullpen that can win a World Series. You add the center fielder that you wanted to lengthen that lineup. And so you're not so reliant on Jeff McNeil and Tyrone Taylor as your only answer at that position. The only thing they didn't accomplish is getting a starting pitcher, and there wasn't a lot to move. But that does not mean that this rotation is not still a question mark moving forward. It absolutely is. So what's the plan for this rotation? How does this new super bullpen help offset some of the question marks in that rotation? I want to go through all that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I'll tell you, with the trade deadline going on, I needed a 5 hour energy or two to just get through the last couple of days with all the work I was doing. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order. It cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you are meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 hour energy shots today. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I appreciate all of you who helped us get to our goal of 14,000 and to fly past it by the deadline. Now the goal is get to 15,000 by the end of the season. I really appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Also, have the notification bell on because we still have our Locked On Mets postcast, so we'll be going live after every game. Chris Schubert does a great job with those, and when he's not available, I'll come on and do a live postcast. So make sure you're checking out the channel and subscribing and keeping that notification bell on. Let's talk about this starting rotation. David Stearns was asked about Clay Holmes. He was asked about where they're at this rotation. Here's what he had to say. He said, we have confidence not only in the starting pitchers we have here, who we think are going to keep us competitive and help us win games. We are also pleased with the development of the guys in AAA who are progressing well. We understand they could, may not definitely, but they could be part of the mix going forward if needed. When asked about Clay Holmes in particular, he said from a physical standpoint, he's in good shape. The stuff is still good, but he did acknowledge that Holmes needs to go a little bit deeper into games. Now, he also said they are not contemplating at this moment shortening up Holmes. He said, let's see how our roster plays and how things come together. Then we can start to plot how September looks. For now, we're going to let this thing play out as is. Paul Blackburn has one more rehab start, David Stearns said. And then he said, we'll see how he gets through that, and we'll go from there. We'll talk to him. Paul Blackburn could get DFA'd. Paul Blackburn could be a long man in the bullpen. Paul Blackburn could take Clay Holmes' spot in the rotation. A lot is up in the air with him, but he'll make a rehab start over the weekend. They'll see how that goes. Again, sort of kicking the can down the road on that decision, and then they will have to make their mind up on what to do with Blackburn. Clearly, there was nothing that they wanted to trade him for at this deadline. You're not going to just trade him to trade him, and if no one was really offering anything of value, then you're best off just waiting and keeping the depth for now, and then making a decision when you have to. For this upcoming series, no moves have to be made for the pitching staff. Rico Garcia is still in the bullpen. The Mets have already optioned Chris Davinsky. I actually said option, but I thought they would have to DFA him. Regardless, he's off the roster because they activated Tyler Rogers. They have yet to activate Ryan Helsley, but there's only 12 pitchers on the active roster right now, so they can activate Helsley. They'll be just fine there. So that is the current state of the pitching staff. The 5 guys they've had in this rotation: Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes. Their bullpen is all locked in with the 3 arms they picked up: Diaz, Raley, Garrett, Stanek, Garcia. Now, if you're looking at the upcoming series, it's going to be David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Frankie Montas. Then you have Sean Manaea. Clay Holmes has not been listed, but you would imagine he's going to pitch on August 5th. Now, Nolan McLean pitched on the same day as Clay Holmes this past week. They both pitched on Wednesday. McLean went 6 innings of 2-run ball. If you wanted to and you just didn't want to give the reporters that answer right now, the Mets very well could be planning on bringing McLean up, and they could piggyback McLean and Holmes and begin to shorten up Holmes, which is what I've been talking about when it comes to this rotation over the last few days. I thought that might be an option for the Mets. You also have Brandon Sproat, who's actually throwing the ball even better than McLean right now. Had another great start to close out his month of July on Thursday. Went 5 innings, allowed 3 hits, 3 walks, hit a batter, but did not give up a run, struck out 9. Across 5 starts in July, Brandon Sproat allowed just 2 earned runs. That was in one of his starts. He had 4 or 5 starts where he did not allow any runs. He struck out 33 compared to 8 walks and 27 innings pitched, allowed only 14 hits. His whip was 0.81. His ERA was 0.67. His season ERA, after a couple dreadful months to start the year, is down to a respectable 4.07. So Brandon Sproat has clearly got his season back on track. So those two guys are waiting in the wings. And you wonder, okay, well, how many innings do they have left to pitch? That's definitely a question I've seen. Well, last year, Brandon Sproat was at 116 and a third innings pitched. He's at 95 now, so he's about 21 and a third innings away from his total last year. In the past, you would say guys can jump 25 to 30 innings in a given year. So theoretically, Brandon Sproat, if you were going towards that old way of thinking with an innings limit, would have plenty of innings left to at least be in the rotation throughout the rest of the season and honestly even into the playoffs. McLean, he's 5 2/3 away from what he did last year, but David Stearns has talked about it a lot. The Mets don't view innings limits that way. They don't put a limit on guys. They are getting feedback. They have a really good medical team, and they are gauging guys on an individual basis on how their arm looks, on how fatigued their arm is, and whether they need to be shut down or not. So I don't think either of these guys is necessarily going to be shut down. I would acknowledge that Brandon Sproat might have a little bit more left in the tank than McLean does, and so maybe McLean makes more sense to shorten up, especially considering how well Sproat is pitched, but you just don't know what they're going to decide to do. The reality is, if we take David Stearns at his word, and he does not lie to the media very often or often at all, he is saying they're going to stick with this rotation. And if you look at how things set up, Peterson's going to start twice in this next stretch of the next 2 series. 6 games before an off day. Peterson's the guy that'll start twice. You always have to monitor Kodai Senga in this rotation, and when you have to slide in a starter to get him his 5th day of rest. Then you'll have Senga, Montas, Minaya, who each got or will get a day off. This is after the 6 games. There's a series in Milwaukee after this 6-game stretch. And in that series, you'll have those 3 guys going, and there's a day off on the Thursday before the series and a day off on the Monday. So all these guys are getting rest. Holmes will have a week between starts, and so will Peterson once you get through that series in Milwaukee. And I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but just follow me. You get to a point eventually where the Mets are going to play 16 games in a row. That's going to stretch into September. But the first time they're going to need a 6th starter ahead of Kodai Senga is August 25th. So that means that the Mets have 3 full weeks after this weekend to let this current rotation play out as is without having to worry about getting Senga extra rest. So as far as a 6-man rotation, that might not be in the cards until September. And David Stearns did allude to the fact that once you get into September, you have an extra roster spot. So I think in September, the Mets very well could go to a 6-man rotation and get a little bit more creative with how they're managing their pitching staff, setting themselves up for October. For now, it seems like they're going to stick with this rotation. But if Clay Holmes has one more bad start, they might make a move. And who knows? They might just decide that they're going to make a move anyway. And Nolan McLean's coming up to piggyback, or Brandon Sproat's coming up to piggyback that start on Tuesday. We'll just have to wait and see. The bottom line with this pitching staff, right? Unless someone gets hurt, the 4 guys that will be starting pitchers from now until the end of the regular season, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas. Those guys are locked in. It's one guy you're up for debate on, and that's Holmes. And then it's a matter of if you ever go to a 6-man rotation. But your other starting pitching options, you have Holmes, you have Blackburn, which I know people aren't going to like, but he's still an option. You have to mention him. You have Tyler McGill, who is working his way back. We still don't have a clear timetable. They said he was throwing and about to throw a bullpen, I believe, this week. Don't know if that happened. No one asked that question during the presser for Stearns. But I'd imagine if he's about to start throwing some live BPs, you're looking at early September at best for Tyler McGill, but still an option once you get there. And then you got McLean and Sproat. So when you look at it from that lens, you have 4 guys locked in and 5 depth options. You understand why the Mets didn't go out there and get a depth starter. And if there wasn't a starting pitcher available for a price they wanted to spend, you sort of get it. And I really feel like the Mets are looking at these next 2 months, envisioning a lot more out of Senga, Minaya, and Montas in particular. They feel great about David Peterson. And with Holmes, it's a wait and see thing, but they still have all of these options. Blackburn has a fully stretched out starting pitcher that you can plug in, and then 2 top pitching prospects who you really like that could be the solution if more problems arise down the stretch. And then you have this lights out bullpen. Last year, the Los Angeles Dodgers ran bullpen games on their path to winning the World Series. It can be done. So, yes, you might not know who the 4th starter is in a playoff rotation. But if everybody stays healthy, I think Peterson, Minaya, and Senga are going to be there. And Montas very well could be the 4, and that could be it. And it could just be about deciding who is going to fill out those last couple slots in your playoff bullpen. Could be Holmes, could be McLean, could be Sproat, could be a Rico Garcia or a Huáscar Brazoban for all we know. The Mets have enough pitching. How it's going to materialize, we still don't know yet. But they have enough pitching. I don't think that they made a mistake at this deadline by not addressing this rotation. I think nothing was attractive enough to go all in on. Because the price for Joe Ryan and Mackenzie Gore and Edward Cabrera, those guys that are pitching well with years of control, was probably exorbitant. And they didn't want to trade McLean or Sproat and give up 6 years of guys that they might like and think have a frontline ceiling for guys who maybe are at that frontline rotation ceiling now, but have 2.5 years of control. They weren't going to make those moves. And then the rental market was very thin. You were either looking at a guy in Merrill Kelly who nobody would call an ace. He pitched great in the playoffs in 2023, has good numbers this season, but he's a 36-year-old who doesn't necessarily have outstanding stuff. And a guy coming off an injury in Bieber. So I think the Mets, at the end of the day, while it would have been great for them to pick up a starting pitcher because it's always fun to get more of these trades, when you look at the picture that they are analyzing for what they have and how they're going to get through the next 2 months and what is stocked up for the playoffs, in their eyes, the best course of action was building a super bullpen and trusting what they had for their rotation. And I think whether they end up going into October with 4 bona fide starters or it's just 3, this bullpen's going to cover up for a lot of the warts of this starting rotation. And I also think it's going to make this rotation start to look better anyway. I really do, because there's something about having that lockdown set of arms behind you that might even infuse some confidence into this rotation. And they also have the ability now where it shouldn't be as much of Austin Warren, Chris Davinsky, Brandon Waddell, Justin Hagenman pitching the middle innings of games. If Clay Holmes gets knocked out in the 4th, all of a sudden it's Ryan Stanek getting up in the 5th inning. It's Reed Garrett. It's Tyler Rogers at times. I mean, the depth of this bullpen is going to overshadow any of the shortcomings of this rotation. And I still think this rotation has so much upside when you think about Minaya and Senga and how much better they can get. I think Montas can get a lot better. Peterson's been awesome. And you have these pitching prospects that I expect we see in some capacity down the stretch, whether it's in the rotation or shortened up as these maybe 3-inning guys you can stick in your bullpen that can help you out and go a long way as well. So it's going to be fun to see how everything comes together, but the Mets have plenty of pitching. Who is going to go down for Cedric Mullins, though? We're going to close the show there in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Day Hue, and so is this hat I'm wearing. For Mets fans like me, this one hits the mark. Game Day Hue makes clean, no logo gear with team-inspired colorways for every pro and college fan base. It's all about letting your colors speak for you. No giant logos, just smart, versatile style that works on game day, on the course, or anywhere in between. Pete Alonso got this hat. He could be repping the Mets. He could be repping University of Florida. If you're a Knicks fan, Knicks Mets. It gives you that versatility, and the hat pairs perfectly with my usual gear, my Mets stuff, whatever else I have. It's the kind of hat that reps your team without screaming it, subtle, but still says everything. And it's not just hats. You also have these split shade gloves made for the golf course, or they're the perfect gift for a fan who has everything. Right now, you can get 15% off with the code MLB15 at GameDayHue.com. That's GameDayHue, HUE.com. The code even stacks on bundle deals. So now it's time to load up. Let your colors talk, because colors speak louder than words. That's GameDayHue.com, code MLB15. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. You get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So we got a couple of updates from David Stearns about a few injured position players, but the updates are basically all but we have no updates. Jesse Winker was moved to the 60 to accommodate these roster moves. The reason why they did that is because he will not be back in August. David Stearns said as much, that he has not progressed well from the epidural. Remember, he had that back injury after the oblique cost him most of this season. It's really feeling like Winker's not going to be a factor, but Stearns did not rule it out that down the stretch they might have Winker available. Jose Siri also said still possible, but he basically said they won't really know anything for the next 7 to 10 days. They might get some news, and then that could give them a timetable for his return. So at this point, he hasn't been cleared, I wouldn't imagine, for any type of activity. And so his road back is pretty long. And also, what's his role in this roster? Is he just going to, in the 11th hour, take Tyrone Taylor's spot, or is he going to eventually just get DFA'd if he ends up healthy enough to return? I just think at this point you cannot count on either of these guys playing a role in this team. So let's talk about the new addition of Cedric Mullins and what this means for their roster. I think in the month of August, you should be playing Cedric Mullins nearly every day in center field. And I was wrong on one part of it. And I actually want to look up and see if the career numbers have me wrong, and I was just wrong the whole way. No. So throughout his career, he has been a little bit better facing right-handed pitching than left, because he's a left-handed hitter. He actually used to be a switch hitter and eventually abandoned his right-handed swing because he was just so bad at it. This year, though, Cedric Mullins has actually been better against lefties than righties, hitting .298 against left-handed pitching, .204 against right-handed pitching. 12 of his 15 home runs, though, have come against righties, not lefties. David Stearns was asked about it. He said, we try not to read too much into smaller sample size on reverse splits, but he did say that they believe that a swing adjustment this year has helped them hang in there a lot better against lefties. So, point being, you do not have to shield Cedric Mullins from left-handed pitching. So, again, right now, I'd be playing him out there almost every day, because it, for one, preserves Jeff McNeil to not have him playing as much center field. And I think that you want to see what you have so you know how to proceed come September. Give him a month of playing time, see how it looks. What does that mean for the rest of this roster? Well, the Mets, for one, have to make a move. And it comes down to two players, Luisangel, Acuna, or Ronny Mauricio. Technically, Brett Beatty is the other one that has an option. Nobody else can be optioned. Obviously, Alvarez could, but you're keeping both of your catchers. So really, it's either option Acuna, Beatty, and Mauricio, or DFA Tyrone Taylor. And I don't think they're going to do that to Tyrone. I think they like his defense still. Cedric Mullins is a good defensive center fielder. He's not a great one. I think you still want that ability to, late in games, go to Tyrone Taylor for defense. Also, you might want to pinch hit and do some things where you're pulling Mullins because Mark Vientos wasn't in there for a given day, and you have a lefty coming out of the bullpen in a RBI situation in the 6th inning. So you decide, you know what? We're going to have Mark Vientos hitting this spot and put Tyrone Taylor in for defense. So I think they're going to keep Tyrone Taylor, and that, again, brings you to the guys with options. Now, Brett Beatty, he played every single day over the past 2 weeks. He's gotten 100 more at-bats than Acuna, nearly double the at-bats this season of Mauricio. He's just a more advanced MLB hitter at this stage than either of those guys. I think Mauricio has shown us there might be more upside, and Mauricio is swinging it better right now. but who is going to give you the better at-bats over the next 100 at-bats? I think it's Brett Baty. He's a better defender than Mauricio. He's a much better hitter than Acuna. Baty's not going anywhere. Now, I have been campaigning over the last few days for potentially Ronny Mauricio to go down if the Mets acquired a center fielder. And my thought process there was this would allow you to play Mullins nearly every day in center, play Jeff McNeil nearly every day at second base. You then have Baty, Vientos, and Marte between third base and DH. Obviously, Baty's not going to DH, but having Baty at second with McNeil DHing some, having Vientos at third with Marte DHing against lefties, and then having Vientos DH the other days. I just felt like this would give everybody the opportunity to play as much as possible, and you can send Mauricio down and have him play every single day in Syracuse. You preserve your option on Luisangel Acuna, because if you send either of those guys down, Mauricio or Acuna, you will lose their final option. If a guy is in the minor leagues for more than 20 days, an option year essentially is exercise that's used. So since both of those guys are at like 17 days in the minors this year, the next option down will be forfeiting that final option year. I think if Mauricio is with the Mets next season, if he's not traded in the offseason, he is going to be probably an everyday player. I think if Acuna is with the Mets next season, he's going to be in a very similar role as what he's in right now. And having that option would be very valuable. So those were the reasons why I was campaigning for Acuna to stay up and Mauricio to go down. But then I looked at the playing time over the last 2 weeks, and I listened to what David Stearns said about being able to play all of these guys. And Acuna has not been playing. And so if you're thinking about who can fill Acuna's role, well, if Tyrone Taylor is relegated to a bench role, he can be your pinch runner off the bench. Defensive replacement at second base, sure, Acuna is great at that, but Brett Baty and Jeff McNeil do not need to be subbed out for defense. They don't. And you would still have Ronny Mauricio as a third option at second base. So the more that I start to think about it, when I look at Ronny Mauricio's 910 OPS against right-handed pitching this year and his 381 average over the last 7 games, you're a worse team if you send Mauricio down. You're not really a worse team if you send Acuna down. And because of that, maybe the Mets send down Acuna and keep Mauricio with the big league club. It can go either way. I honestly can see the merits in sending Mauricio down, giving him everyday run in Syracuse so he just stacks at bats for a month. I think he would get better under that context. The Mets, though, their lineup might get worse. Over the last 15 days, 12 games played over the past 2 weeks. 4 guys played in every game. Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, and Baty. Soto obviously missed that last game after fouling the ball off of his foot in the second to last game before the deadline. Mark Vientos played in 10 of 12. Ronny Mauricio played in 9 of 12. Jeff McNeil played in 10 of 12. And Tyrone Taylor played in 10 of 12. Now, when it comes to plate appearances, Vientos got 37 plate appearances. Ronny Mauricio got 30. Jeff McNeil got 38 and got 10 walks, by the way. He outwalked Soto over the last 2 weeks. So, man, Jeff really patient in the box right now. Probably because his teams were comfortable going up against the younger guys at the bottom of the lineup who were making those pitchers pay. So you look at that breakdown and you wonder where does Mullins fit in? Well, Tyrone Taylor, again, played in 10 of 12 games. He got 21 plate appearances. I think if you give those plate appearances all to Cedric Mullins, if you eat into Brett Baty's playing time a bit and give some of those plate appearances to Jeff McNeil, which in turn is giving, so if you keep McNeil at the workload that he's been doing, just more at second base than in center field, and you eat into Baty's playing time a bit, you get Baty more on the line of Ronny Mauricio. So instead of, closer to 45 plate appearances in a 2-week stretch, maybe it's more like 30. And that's how you fit all these guys together. It actually can work. You have third base where it can be sort of a timeshare between Baty and Mauricio, with Vientos getting the occasional start against a lefty. At second base, a timeshare between Baty and McNeil, with McNeil playing some second, playing some center, maybe playing in a corner if they want to give Nimmo or Soto a DH day. And they can DH Jeff McNeil at times too to get him off of his feet at 33 years old. So I actually think the Mets can make this work, where the guy who's losing at bats, the only guy who's losing at bats, is Tyrone Taylor, where Tyrone Taylor is just the defender at this point. He's barely ever hitting. And under that context, you can get away with keeping all these guys on the roster. But I also see the merit in sending Mauricio down if they choose to go down that route, to give Vientos everyday playing time, to give Beatty everyday playing time, to give McNeil and Mullins, to get all of those guys in there a ton. It's just what the Mets think is best for them in August and then moving forward. Whether they think it's best to preserve that option for Acuna and to get Mauricio everyday run, like I mentioned on, I think it was the Cedric Mullins show today. You could have Mauricio go down there and now he can play against lefties and see if he can figure out that right-handed swing, because then he is that much more valuable as a switch hitter. Because right now, the Mets have been playing him like he is just a left-handed bat that they don't want to face left-handed pitching. So there is that clear developmental gain that they can send him down to achieve, and also just getting better at third base. It's a position that he hasn't played a ton of. Send him down there, have him be the everyday third baseman in Syracuse. I really can see both sides of the argument. I honestly can. I don't even know which way I would go if it was my decision, because I see the value in either way the Mets could choose to go about it. But that's what we had to look forward to here. That's where the roster stands. That's the one decision left to be made. And when it comes to the starting rotation, as we've alluded to, they're going to roll with what they have for now. And I'll update you if they decide to deviate from that and bring up one of the kids, or if Paul Blackburn is going to be a starting pitcher when he comes up and they might do something else with Clay Holmes. That's going to be all for today's show. Didn't really have time for a series preview, but you're going to get Robbie Ray versus David Peterson tonight. So that's a fun pitching matchup. I will have a full show for you tomorrow morning where I can preview the final two games of this series and talk about whatever we learned when it comes to the final roster move the Mets are going to make, how these guys looked in their first game in a Mets uniform. A lot of fun ahead for this Mets team. We got 2 months left. We're through the deadline now. It's all about seeing this team try to win games and go toe-to-toe with the Phillies in the National League East. It's going to be a thrilling pennant race. I can't wait to cover every minute of it with you all on this show. As always, thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local host from each team, league-wide host from each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.